All right, so again, this is Craig Fisnick with Sand County Foundation, and we're summarizing the farmer-led fund that we're offering to producer-led groups in Wisconsin with support from a NRCS Regional Conservation Partnership Program award. The intention is to support the expansion of farmer groups in Wisconsin, but also to advance groups in neighboring states, particularly Illinois. So the largest amount of this award is going to Illinois. We're contracting and partnering with American Farmland Trust to create something along the lines of Wisconsin's program, but not the same. It'll have a different name. It'll have a different set of criteria, but that is happening in Illinois, although today we're just going to talk about the work we're offering in Wisconsin. And we want to be able to allow some creative financial incentives. This is sourced from the NRCS, but it is not EQIP, and it does not require that folks follow payment scenarios and payment rates or methods of EQIP or CSP. We'll get to that more in a minute. But similar goals as the Wisconsin producer-led program, supporting soil health, continuous living cover, a lot of edge-of-field and in-field practices, perennial practices and row crop annual practices. Now, any group in Wisconsin is eligible. We're not going to fund the entire state of Wisconsin, but Great Lakes, Mississippi River Basin is equally eligible across Wisconsin. Likewise in Illinois, under the direction of American Farmland Trust. And you'll see in the corner here, Dubuque County, Iowa, we threw in. They're already doing some work under this award, and we've been working with them before, so we decided to include them as they border the two states. The main points, the farmer-led fund, again, is specifically the Wisconsin portion of this offer, of this program. And some of the main points to know, this applies actually to all three states under RCPP. There are some strict upfront and at the end requirements. Any producer who benefits from this funding must be eligible for USDA program requirements, the adjusted gross income, the HEL, the wetlands compliance, and all that. And the easiest way to do this is if your farmer-led group is awarded a grant from our farmer-led fund from Sand County Foundation. At some point, preferably early in the process, it would be nice. Well, we would want to get a whole list of all the farmers who might participate. The farmers would have to be willing to have their name, their legal farm entity, their farm number shared with Sand County Foundation and from us to the NRCS. And then the NRCS office can verify that everybody's eligible who would participate. That'll help us figure those things out up front and not worry about surprises later on. Another main point of this is practices must meet NRCS technical standards, specifications. It doesn't mean that we necessarily have to fill out the extent of paperwork for every single farm. For example, if we're going to do cover crops and we're going to do a single mix for all the farms in the farmer-led group through a local program, we can fill out one job sheet or one implementation requirement sheet for that cover crop mix. And if there's 50 farmers using it, the one sheet applies to everybody. So it might reduce some of the busy work, but everything still has to, minimum seeding rates, seeding windows, those have to meet technical standards no matter what. But this third bullet is where a lot of flexibility comes in, the alternative funding arrangement. So that's the type of RCPP award we have. And we can be creative about financial incentives. We're not looking at NRCS EQIP payment rates. Okay, we can pay at different rates. We can pay by different means. And that's where a lot of the uniqueness comes in. But keep in mind, it's not intended to just throw more money on top of things and see how much we can pay. We're hoping that we can pay less than might be necessary through more efficient delivery of the financial incentives. But the goals are similar as the Wisconsin producer-led program from DATCP. Conserve soil, improve soil health. Ultimately, water quality is our primary objective, our primary resource concern. But going along with the ride with that becomes reduce greenhouse gas emissions, climate benefits, wildlife habitat. These are the categories of resource concerns in NRCS speak that we are trying to address. And we're trying to stay away from expensive structural practices. It's not that we can't do some structural practices, but We don't have a lot of money to offer for engineering and design. And if you can bring that to the table, then maybe it could be used, but mostly we're looking at non-structural practices. And then lastly, if you apply for Farmer-Led Fund grant, we are looking for in-kind. I put match in quotes because for RCPP, it's called partner contributions. It can be cash or in-kind. We don't have a set minimum for the whole overall award in all 3 states. We need to meet at 33% in-kind. We need to maintain that amount. So the more, the better. But we're not telling any particular farmer group they have to meet a certain threshold. We'll kind of see what comes, and you'll be more competitive in being selected if you can offer more. As far as what financial assistance goes to the farmer-led groups who receive a grant from us, financial assistance is the main thing. This is an implementation grant. This is not mainly a outreach and education grant. We totally appreciate and understand and agree that technical assistance funds are what a lot of groups really need more of, more staff time, more ability to do the on-the-ground work. But we're under an RCPP program that requires we spend at minimum 75% of the budget getting practices installed on the ground, and that's what we have to follow. So your proposal needs to have 75 or more % of the budget promising to get practices installed on the ground. You can pay for practice in a traditional sense per acre, per linear feet. I'm gonna mute somebody here. All right. We can pay for outcomes, pay for a pound of phosphorus reduced per the SNAP Plus PI reduction before and after they apply practices, tons of sediment. Pay for performance or performance-based outcomes, as we call it. We can also, I get my cursor working again. We can also pay a contractor or a custom operator in lieu of the producer, what sometimes people are calling batch and build. We can pay a seed drill operator to plant a bunch of buffers. We can pay a cover crop installer or applicator to apply cover crops instead of paying the farmer, if that's a more efficient way that your group believes you can do it. We can pay for land rental. This is a little bit different. This is like CRP, but not for land retirement. Could be converting row crop to prescribed grazing, to perennial buffers, to agroforestry. The maximum length is 3 years. So this is meant just to cover a transition period. And the maximum amount is limited to, I believe, National Ag Statistic rental rates, which would be certainly not more than CRP, but that is an option, and it can be done in addition to paying for the practice to be applied. And if your group has other ideas, bring them to us. This is what we're looking for. We're looking for ideas of how producer-led groups themselves may best be the people who can best identify what is going to move my peers, what is the motive, what is going to be an appropriate level and form of financial assistance that will motivate more farmers and more acres than might otherwise participate in traditional cost share or financial assistance programs. So we don't be afraid to propose new ideas or versions of other bullets on this list. Now to the technical assistance, again, maximum 25% of the budget. And the main point is this all has to really directly connect to getting these practices on the ground. So project management is fair game, but it has to be tied to managing this project and not something else. Project outreach, absolutely, but it must be explicit to promoting this project, not just kind of general workshops. Practice design and installation. We will want to get the names of people who would be doing that and run them by NRCS. If you got job approval authority, that's going to be the easiest way. But it doesn't mean you have to have that. You county folks who have relationships with your local NRCS offices and are trusted to do certain practices, that's going to go a long way. But we're going to individually want to communicate with you and the NRCS before awarding a grant to make sure that people can follow the, know the NRCS standards, and that NRCS will ultimately pay us for the applied practices because they trust the people who designed them or oversaw the installation. Once things are installed, NRCS says they will do at least 5% spot checks. I'll use cover crops as an example. Again, if you got 50 farms doing cover crops, expect the local NRCS staff to want you to take them out to 5% of those fields at least and just show them the practices in the ground. And then we won't get into outcome estimation too much, but there are a lot of things we want to quantify, and Haley Summers on our staff will help in some digital tools and modeling assistance that could help us estimate greenhouse gas emission reductions, runoff, and so forth. So that's something where we'll have to work together to help estimate outcomes. And last slide here is just some key points to keep in mind. This again is NRCS funds. We're meeting a resource concern. Sand County Foundation is very much advocate of the early adopters and this issue with additionality. Do you have to be doing something wrong in order to get paid to do something right? Well, that is the case here. So we must be meeting a resource concern or achieving like a higher level of conservation for whatever you're applying. In the case of a cover crop, if you're simply planting it early, terminating it later, diversifying your seed mix, all of those things would count for meeting a higher resource concern level. We cannot duplicate practices. Obviously, you can't pay for it with our funds if EQIP's already paying for the same acre in the same year. Same thing applies to CRP, CSP, even the USDA Climate Smart Commodity Funds. So that's something to look out for. This one is really important, and I wish we could get around it, but we cannot get advance payments from NRCS to do this. And NRCS will not pay Sand County Foundation until we provide the evidence that the practices are on the ground. And we have limited, not much, ability to pay up front before we get paid from NRCS. So there might be a long delay to we're working on ways to try to get more financing up front to bridge the gap, and that might come to be later, but for the time being, expect that there will be some delay in getting reimbursed from the time you can say the cover crop's on the ground to the time you invoice us, we get paid by NRCS, and then we pay you. We're talking possibly 2 to 3 months, maybe shorter, but keep that in mind. And we'll see if that can improve as we find other short-term funding. And then my very last point is if you're looking to make a proposal or application to us to use these funds, we like to ask people, how is this going to be different than EQIP? If it's something that EQIP can do well, and we're just going through a bunch of busy work to reinvent the wheel, then this isn't for us. But if it's something where you're able to turn it around faster, you're able to do it for cheaper, maybe the burden of participating is streamlined for the farmer, so more people will participate. If you can reach more farmers, do it quicker, do it in batched big, like one practice, you do a bunch of it all at once. That's kind of the reason we've gone through all the effort to make this possible through RCPP to try to do something a little differently than traditional EQIP. And again, 1 or 2 practices in your, funded through this program might be better than trying to do like a full-on grazing system with the pipeline and the alleys and the seeding. If it's 10 practices in one contract, that might get too complicated for our program. So it might be better to do like 1 or 2 things and do them well and repeat them for many farms. Okay, I'm finally looking at my chat and feel free to like raise a hand and if you just want to speak it out that way as well. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can actually see the participants. Will grant recipients be required to complete a NEPA form? Yes, I didn't include that in my list. So the CPA 52 forms, that is one little administrative hassle that we're going to have to deal with. Again, that's where kind of like checking for eligibility up front. If you know what farmers are participating, what practices they want to apply, I'll keep using the cover crop example. It's just we're going to repeat the same form and sign it for a bunch of different farms, but we do have to do those. We don't have an exemption for that. And who's going to sign the form? That is, we're about to sort that out with NRCS in Wisconsin. But it would either be the local NRCS, or I think we go through the state office typically to get that done. But we're having a discussion with NRCS soon about the exact process to do that. But I would expect if you participate in our farmer-led fund, you would be needing to provide the information needed to do that. And even better, if you can provide the staff time to fill out that form, whether it's a bunch of redundant forms or one that covers multiple farms, we have to figure that out. Do you need a formal bidding process to select suppliers for batch and build? No, but do justify why you're picking who it is you're working with. If you have a particular agronomist, if you're doing soil samples through a particular lab, if you're have some local operators that just are part of your farmer group network, you can we don't have a strict formal bidding process for competition. But we do want you to justify why you're going with who you're going to and know what the rates are going to be. But and kind of related to that question, also just to keep in mind, this is not the producer-led grant program. This is separate from DATCAP. But much like the DATCAP funds, if we fund your group, we want to make one contract with your group fiscal agent or of that group, or the county or whoever the 501c3 is. And then you do the distribution of the funds. So Sand County Foundation is not going to pay a contractor directly. We're not going to pay 20 farmers through 20 different contracts. We're going to pay one grantee. Could be a county, could be a nonprofit, could be a 501c3 if you're incorporated that way. And then you, the recipient, need to distribute those funds through your own methods and your own contracting forms to either farmers and or contractors. All right. Who else has questions? You can just unmute and pipe up right now because I don't have any raised hands or other chat.
Greg, there was another question, and I lost it now, but someone was asking about if their DATCAP funding could be used as their match requirement.
Yes, it certainly may. Yep, DATCAP funding is fair game. Anything non-USDA, that means federal funds can also be used as match if they're not USDA. If you have an EPA 319 grant, if you have National Fish and Wildlife Federation funds and it comes from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, that's non-USDA, so that can count as your match. How often will reimbursements? Oh, just real quick, reimbursements, we would like to go quarterly, every 3 months. If it's something where you're making one big lump payment for a bunch of seed or a single contractor payment, then we can, pay when the payment is due. And we don't have to wait 3 months to do that. But in general, we would basically try to be on a 3-month quarterly rate. All right, somebody just spoke a question, I think.
Yeah, hey Craig, Scott with
Hey,
Business
Scott.
Rubber. If you do the batch and build model that you're talking about where you're paying contractors directly, do you still need farm eligibility from NRCS USDA?
We do, because if the farmer gets the service, even if they don't get paid any money, they benefit. They get the value of the financial assistance, whether it's in the form of cash or the form of a service that someone else is paid to do. So it would look all the same in terms of upfront eligibility. We would want to get that list of eligible farmers up front. I mean, theoretically, if you had 30 farmers in the farmer group and you could give us the names of all of them, even if you didn't know they were all going to necessarily participate, then we just know everybody's good up front. That would be ideal. I see Tanya, you asked basically the same question in the chat. But yes, eligibility remains. Now here's a way, I mean, let's say you had DATCAP funds or let's say you had some other funds that you were mixing with our RCPP funds, and those funds mixed together, we're going to fund 30 farmers to do something in a batch and builds or custom operator fashion, and you found out that 5 or 6 farmers weren't eligible for some reason or another, but you wanted to pay them through your other funds, it could appear to the farmer group, or it could, for all intents and purposes, be that everybody's getting funded, but you're only asking for our reimbursement for those who are eligible. So we have to be strict on the eligibility, but if you want to mix your program with other funds that could then cover some otherwise ineligible funds totally outside of our RCPP, but then to the farmers, it all appears as your same localized program, that's fine with us.
Does that farm eligibility extend to AGI?
It does. We do not have a blanket waiver on AGI. We could request one, adjusted gross income, right? Or that every farmer must be under a certain, threshold of their adjusted gross income to be eligible to use NRCS funds. I don't know well, it's a bit of a process, but apart from every farmer asking for an individual AGI waiver, which I know is difficult, if there was some compelling reason that your farmer group could reach a new high exciting outcome by waiving AGI for people in the group, then let us know and we'll pursue it. It could take a little time to confirm if we can get that.
For the alternative funding payments, those have to be tied directly to a conservation practice standard.
I'm sorry, the what again? Apply to a standard?
So your payments under the alternative funding
Yeah.
mechanism, coming up with creative new ideas to
Mhm.
say this is better than EQIP, they still need to be tied to conservation practice standards
Yes.
to be vetted. We can't
Yes, they
come up
do.
with new ones.
Yes. So I mean, there has to be a 3-digit NRCS practice standard to which what we will report to NRCS is the practice is on the ground. It applies and it fits the standard. What we bill them for, we could bill them for soil sampling. We could bill them for a big purchase of seed, or for a seed, or for a custom applicator. We bill them for what it took to get it done, but what triggers NRCS to agree to pay us is that they verify that practice is on the ground according to that standard. I mean, for example, we could be paying nothing but soil sampling. But you'd have to tie that into like a 590 nutrient management standard being followed. And then we just helped the farmer achieve that through paying for soil sampling and nothing else. And NRCS won't care that we're just paying for this component of it, but they just want to see that we can prove the standard is applied. And then Paul's question, it sounds like a pot of money that would operate similar to EQIP, but with a little more flexibility. I mean, that's what we're trying to get at, yes. But as far as like, where does the flexibility come in? It's basically why we're crowdsourcing this idea to all of you, is we think that the localized farmer groups may have some good ideas about how to make things more accessible to farmers in their network. Virtual fencing equipment, collars and such. Yes, that's an exciting thing we would love to do. I have talked with Adam Abel about it, the state grazing specialist. He thinks this RCPP offer could be a good way to get that started. That would require a little more conversation with Adam. And if your group wants to apply to use virtual fencing, then let me know and we will have that conversation. There is a new national standard for virtual fencing, I'm told. I haven't seen it. There are issues about, is there enough perimeter fencing and so forth to match with, and then we would have to show that there's a grazing plan being followed. It may not necessarily mean a full-on CPA 110 like documentation for every farm. And also we have on staff Brianna Schnelly, who's a technical service provider for grazing, who could help sign off on verification that there is a prescribed grazing practice being followed. But with that, we could potentially pay for virtual fencing equipment, possibly even work directly with the vendor if that was more efficient than with individual farmers. But those are things we'll have to iron out through a conversation if you want to pursue that that option. And for Scott, yes, if your farmer group applies, the 100,000 ceiling is for 1 year per farmer group. And then if you look at the proposal form, we ask you to explain how you might expand it in or continue it in 2 or 3 or 4 more years. And we could repeat that up to 100,000, maybe even more. We're going to see how this first year goes and revisit things before the second year. So we're leaving it open-ended, but just to get us started, we don't want to go more than 100,000 with any particular group. And even that, we want to see, a compelling pitch from you that, hey, we have farmers lined up who are interested in doing this. It's not like all speculative, but we have pretty good assurance that there's the demand for this. Because this is really intended more of an implementation and scaling up project. So if your group has done enough on the ground work to discover that we have a good option here, we just need more money to get more acres, then you can go up to the 100,000. And then we'll revisit it to see how success goes in subsequent years. And Tom is asking if 2 groups could coordinate, could that be 200,000? We have our ceiling at 100,000 per proposal. We would love to see groups coordinate. We know there are many smaller producer-led groups that are nearby each other and even get together to co-sponsor events and things like that. But we're asking for $100,000 cap per application, even if it aggregates multiple farmer groups. Thanks, Sarah, for joining. I hope to follow up with you as you're jumping off early. So, but this is also new. Keep in mind, this is new. We're going to see what we hear back. We put March 31st as a deadline. That doesn't mean we want you all to wait till then and then see everything at once on the 31st. We'd rather, this is more of a first come, first serve thing. So if you make a proposal to us and then it's almost like the first step in a bigger conversation, and then we can work towards sorting out the details and have an agreement. We don't have to wait till after March 31st to start a subaward with anybody. So keep that in mind. And we're gonna see where this goes. It's the first, it's the first edition of this funding opportunity. So I wouldn't think too hard whether it's 100,000 or 200,000 or 1 group or 2 groups. If you got a good idea, fill out a proposal form and talk to us. And we're trying to build in as much flexibility as we can for the coming years. And how long will that go? 4 years or more. So we have a 5-year award. The clock started ticking in July. So July of 2024 and 5 years on. We don't want to be still verifying a lot of practices getting applied just at the end of the 5 years. So 4 years would be the most, 3 years, maybe more realistically the most. But if we get something started in 2025, we could certainly, as funding allows, continue in 2026 and 2027, and possibly 2028. And can this change with the new federal administration? Well, the funds are obligated. If you're familiar with RCBP, people get an award and then it might take a year. It took us almost a year to get all the agreements signed within RCS before we can actually do anything on the ground. So we've been through that process. Our funds are obligated, just like somebody's EQIP is obligated. And we don't expect there's a way to claw that back from us, from the USDA now. What else? can a group make multiple proposals as long as it stays under 100,000? I mean, I would say, well, one per year, you know, if your entity is making a proposal, that's the single proposal for the year at 100,000. Okay, and do you think that the funds you're looking for would expire on December 31st, 2025? Not necessarily. I mean, if you, I don't know if I'm answering this question, Tanya. If I'm not, let me know. But let's say we make a sub-award to you and we call it 100,000 or 50,000 for 12 months. It's not like we'll pull the money away if you're still needing more time to finish it. You know, we'll take that as it goes. So I guess we're looking for proposals that start with a 12-month budgeting time frame or a whole farming season and predict what you could use in that amount of time. But you know, we can be very flexible about extending it, renewing it, adding funds, you know, maybe agreeing to reduce the funds if your demand isn't what you thought it was. So we're going to be practical as far as how all that goes.
Craig, so kind of to the question that I asked about the multiple proposals, one proposal could include like multiple strategies. Is that right? So like one proposal could include a group saying they want to fund or apply cover crop seed bulk, but they also could have a component that's based on soil sampling.
Yes. Absolutely. Yep.
Craig, could you talk a little bit more about the estimated outcomes and who would be evaluating them? Would the technical service providers from the producer-led watershed groups be evaluating those, or would Haley be evaluating those from our data?
At minimum, I mean, there's the obvious outcomes of acres and linear feet and people reached and whatnot that we're going to want to know. We did also promise in RCS that we would estimate nutrient loss from runoff, sediment loss, and net greenhouse gas emission changes. We're working, for example, with Field to Market, Field Print Calculator. We're doing that in Dubuque County. They're the first, we're already funding Dubuque County. We did a bunch of cover crop work with them in a batch and build style. And we're putting all that data into Field Print Calculator, and Haley Summers here on the call is doing most of that. And then that spits out a Comet, just a Comet planner, you know, outcome for the greenhouse gas estimations and a nutrient tracking tool for the nitrogen. So we would want information from you in a good enough format that we could plug some basic information ourselves into that platform or another platform. And it wouldn't be that you have to run these models, but that you would have to provide some information like in a spreadsheet form. I mean, one important thing is going to be spatial location, you know, like preferably shape files, you know, geospatial. We got to know the field boundary, you know, as accurately as possible. If there's some information about your crop rotation or some inputs, we would want to have that. It doesn't have to be SNAP plus intensity of data input unless you're trying to pay on outcomes like a phosphorus index reduction through SNAP plus, in which case, obviously, we would need very rigorous SNAP plus, you know, input. And Haley, chime in if you want to. She's our geospatial data scientist who's really making a lot of this work in Dubuque County as we're quantifying our work there.
Yeah, I just, to simplify what Craig said, we're not going to ask you to do anything crazy. If you already have SNAP Plus plans and you're willing to share those with us, that'd be great. It'd be a great way for us to get nutrient removal from that. Otherwise, I'm going to be doing the hard work on my end, and I might just ask you for some additional data about where your field is, what you planted last year, what you planted this year, just some simple things. And if you're ever uncomfortable answering any of those questions, you know, we can make it work. So, yeah, but don't worry about the outcome requirement part. I will be handling all of that.
Thank you, Haley.
Okay. And a question from Tom about like, what if we like part of a proposal, but not all? Again, we're gonna be really flexible. If you say, hey, we want to do a soil sampling thing and a cover crop thing, and they're totally unrelated, but they're packaged together, and we could come back to you and say, hey, this one part isn't gonna work, but the other one could work. Absolutely. So, if you're willing to throw out some ideas and not necessarily have all or nothing, then we can, you know, if something looks really good to us and seems to fit, then we'll let you know that this is better than something else. We don't want to be like totally quiet, have you submit a complete proposal and hear nothing from us and then a strict yes or no. That's kind of why we're doing this rolling basis, you know, send us your proposal. We tried to make the form fairly short and simple in the fact that if you do already have DAC cap funding, just send us a copy of that most recent proposal. And that tells us 80% of what we want to know. And then our PDF form for the actual proposal asks for the additional information we need. So send us that and we'll get back to you and expect to have some back and forth after that point. And Tina, you're asking, is it possible to pay the full cost of adopting a practice? It can be. It doesn't have to be a 75% rate or a 90% rate. It can't be more than the actual cost, but if you have a way to make it affordable, and the farmer pays nothing, and then that's fine. This is a little complicated, but what we promised to NRCS is that for a given farmer group in a given year, for example, if you submit a proposal and at the end of the year you've done X acres of this practice, we are gonna go to the EQIP payment schedule and see what would it have cost to do at the 100% rate, not 75 or 95, but the 100% rate of the what NRCS calls the payment schedule for that practice in that scenario. What would it have cost to do it with EQIP? And we can't pay the group more in total than it would have cost to do that practice on all the acres across the whole year with EQIP. That's just so we have some kind of limit to not get into exorbitant payment rates. What we think is that what we really want to do is be cheaper than EQIP. Like I'll go to Dubuque, you know, we seeded 8,000 acres of cover crop with one contract for seed and one contract for drones, and the farmers received no cash whatsoever. And our per acre rate was less than if all those farmers would have gone through EQIP even at a 75% rate. Of course, the farmers still have to terminate and they have their, you know, internal costs of managing. But we cost the USDA less to reach 8,000, 8,500 acres than we would have if everybody got an EQIP contract. That's the kind of thing we want to do with this. We want to find streamlined ways to do more with less. If you're, for example, paying for outcomes, let's say phosphorus reduction, it could be that one farm with super high phosphorus on a steep erosive slope goes into permanent pasture and the rate is really high. There's a big PI reduction and they get more on that 40 acres than they could have ever got from EQIP. That's okay, as long as when you average it out over the whole grantee, the whole farmer group for the whole year, the average per acre cost does not go over what EQIP would have paid for whatever collection of practices that were applied. I hope that makes sense, but just suffice it to say, we don't want to see proposals that are just trying to put so much money in front of people that they can't refuse it. That's not what we're looking at. We're looking at using the wisdom of and the local knowledge of the partners and the farmer leaders to say, boy, if we could design the financial incentive, we'd do it this way and we'd get more done and more people would participate and it'd be easier to do. And therefore it would probably require less money to motivate people. That's what we're hoping to achieve. And, you know, beyond this Q&A session, I mean, if questions come to you separately, if you want to reach out to us individually, my contact information is in the call for proposals. If you want to talk specifically about like outcome estimation, we can bring Haley in to talk about it. We'll get to the bottom of the exact process for the NEPA CPA 52 forms. And you know, once we see what you guys want to do in terms of specific practices or even adjustments to practices, there'll probably be some follow-up conversation. We'll probably check with NRCS. So some of these questions we'll have to figure out together if you want to pursue a specific idea. Will the presentation be shared afterwards? I will post probably on our website. I'll let everybody know when we have a recording of this to share. And then how do we check if a farmer has been paid for a specific practice by USDA in the past? First of all, as part of sharing with USDA the list of farmers who may or will participate as far as upfront eligibility check, we will share with USDA like the spatial extent of the practices, which includes the farm and number and track number of the applied practices. And we kind of let NRCS know, hey, this is so you can tell us if anybody's also in EQIP, because we won't know. We don't have access to know who's in other programs. So for example, do the farmer need to seed? Yeah. So yeah, that's where we will let NRCS notify us if somebody has already been getting paid for a cover crop on that exact acre, on that exact field. I will say this is where, going back to the match, this is where even if it's just 10% match, if your farmer group has some cash match, and there's going to be examples where somebody isn't eligible or somebody's already been paid for it, or we miss something, in order to not have to go to that farmer and say, oh, I'm sorry, we're going to boot you off. If you had a little bit of cash funds just to catch those examples, that we don't have to lose our sleep over, you know, 1 out of 50 people somehow being not eligible when we thought they were, that would be nice, where your match funds could just cover that. And then it's not going to, you know, be a big interruption of the program. And then Kirsten, would grassland bird habitat be considered for a grazing practice? So I'd say let's look into where that fits the standard. I know there is or will be the new wildlife habitat standard, right, for grazing, where you could manage specifically for grassland birds. And that could be something that we could tie to as a practice. We just have to find the practice standard where it links. I see Haley has answered one of the questions too in the chat.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure most of you have gone through this type of some kind of federal approval like this for the farms, but I think Craig and I and Haley could help if you want to talk through how to streamline some kind of process for checking the farmers through like NEPA and their eligibility, because we've all been working through that with some of our own grants and figuring out what information's needed. So we have a lot of knowledge now that we've had to learn slowly by asking a lot of questions, and hopefully that will help you all make it a little smoother.
Yeah, there'll be some busy work that we'll do behind the scenes, but part of the idea is streamline it for farmer participation above all. And it might still be work on our behalf with the grant lead. But we want to not have to go to farmers and say, oh, will you give us all this redundant information that you already gave NRCS separately, right? We want to keep it simple, at least how it faces outwardly to farmers. Oh, I guess one thing I should add too, in addition to us offering help with outcome estimation, there's simply like enrolling farmers in a program. Like if you just have a bunch of 2-page Word documents and you're trying to manage them all in a clumsy Excel spreadsheet, we are in the process of contracting with a data platform. There's more and more of these tools out there now, some of it resulting from the Climate Smart Commodity Grants, that we can have our own digital interface with a login where your program manager could be entering farmer information in a online system and not just managing a bunch of, files in a folder. Streamlining a contract that could be auto-populated with farmer names from a spreadsheet, things like that. We haven't selected who we're going to work with yet. Haley, go ahead and chime in, but we expect to have some kind of service available that might streamline the process of just managing different farmers, even though you as the grantee would be the one paying those farmers if you're paying them individually.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that. We mentioned earlier that we'd like to have exact locations of where practices are being installed. We said the word shapefiles, which is just a fancy way of saying a map that we can put into our system, our GIS system on our end. We will be making sure that we give you everything you need to be able to give us that information easily. So don't worry about having to learn GIS to be able to apply for this. If there's anything you need from a technical capacity, we can always help you with that as well. And hopefully we'll have this data platform in place so that we don't even have to worry about that. But if we need to make anything on the back end to make that process easier, it's pretty easy for us to do.
And Kirsten asks back to the up to 25% TA costs. Can it apply to an accountant or director hours? So this is where it starts to get tricky. What would really be preferred is it's the technical person on the ground working one-on-one with farmers, or at least doing the outreach at the field events and all that, and you're billing their time. What we will need with TA billing is we do need some detail of the description of what they're doing with those hours. An accountant would likely not fly. We would probably be told by NRCS we're not paying for accountants. Generally, that falls under indirect, and we absolutely cannot charge for indirect costs. So ideally, what you're billing for TA is the person who you can say they went to these events and specifically promoted our farmer cost share program. They went to farms and helped them select their seed mix or verified practices. That's the easy stuff to quantify and get paid for. We'd rather avoid trying, if there's a director who spends some small fraction of their time overseeing, that's okay. But we want to stick to the kind of boots on the ground as much as possible with the TA. Do grantees need to have any qualifications for non-engineering practices like ecological job approval? That is a bit fuzzy. If you have job approval authority by the NRCS or you're a TSP, that is absolutely the best and easiest way. No question, you're certified and you can do it. But that said, NRCS has told us not everybody needs those formal certifications. But I think in the process, if you do choose to apply for this farmer-led fund and you list names, basically, if that person in the county office or wherever is already working with NRCS standards, it's really a judgment call. We're striving to get this information up front. So if we choose to make a grant to your group, we can say this person, name, title, is going to do this work on the ground to see the cover crops are done to standard. And then if that person is known to NRCS or you're working with them already, have a history, that hopefully is enough. We just have to go through that process to confirm that that's the case. So I don't expect we're going to necessarily tell you got to go do all this jump through all these hoops to get this certification, but some experience working with NRCS as a partner would certainly help in that regard. And again, if it just on the grazing question, so we do have Brianna Schnelli on our staff who is a TSP for grazing. And if you wanted to do something grazing related where your staff were putting together all the information to verify it, like, then she could be the person signing off. Of course, you know, that would involve some time to make sure we're getting the right information, but that's a possibility for the grazing realm to use our TSP for the final review and signing off of anything related to grazing. Well, minus the engineering, of course. So if we want to do livestock pipelines, that'll be another level of making sure they're done to standard as well.